Hello, Statistics for Business students. You've made it to your last applied activity in the course on hypothesis tests. Please make sure you fill in the title page with your name and student number, and then this assessment has two parts, like almost all of your activities in this class. So first, you're going to have some standard calculations for hypothesis tests where everybody has the same questions. So the first one is about proportions. You'll have to write out the hypotheses. Please make sure you use the proper notation because you will be marked on that. You'll have to do the calculations for the hypothesis test, make a decision using the p-value, make a decision using the critical value, and then interpret your answer in the context of the problem. So what does it mean in relation to Cambrian students? Then I want you to change the significance level of the test to only 1% instead of 5% and explain if that changes your decision to reject or not. Make sure in this box you specifically talk about if your final decision changed and if the p-value and the critical value changed. You have to mention all three of those things, a decision change, a p-value, and a critical value change, and if they changed or not, in order to get full marks for this part of the question. Next, you'll move into hypothesis testing for the mean. You will use a real data set for this question. That data set is on real estate, and specifically, you'll be looking at the mean price of homes in a region. That data is found in the real estate data sheet. I put it in here because it's quite a large data set with over 1,000 rows, so it's in its own sheet. So for that, you'll have to write out the hypotheses, again, using the correct notation, calculate some of the statistics from the data, and then use those in order to perform the hypothesis test. You'll make a decision using a p-value, a critical value, and your interpretation. So basically, because I give you in the calculation section that you are finding t-test and t-star, I'm telling you that you need to use the t-distribution for this question because this is sample data and not population data. It says right in the question that it's a sample of homes. In the second part of the question, I'll ask you to use the normal distribution instead. Even though you should use the t because it is sample data, I want you to just use the normal distribution and see if it actually changes the p-value and critical value and if it changes your decision. The reason I want you to specifically examine this is because in the past, they just used to use the normal distribution, and for large samples, the results are usually close. So I want you to see if they actually are close or not by using the normal distribution instead for the p-value and z-star, writing if it changed your decisions, and then finally comparing the results overall. Is there a different decision? How does the p-value change? How does the critical value change? Again, you need to mention all of those things to get full marks. In part two, you'll be developing another template. So this is basically like part two of the confidence interval assignment. Just this time, instead of making the template to get the results of a confidence interval with lower and upper bound, this time you're going to make a template in order to conduct hypothesis tests. The purpose of the template should be to calculate the test statistic. It could be a Z or T score, the p-value, and the decision. You don't also have to include the critical values. You can just make a decision using the p-value because otherwise it will get quite complicated. It should be able to work for different types of hypothesis tests, including proportions, means using the normal distribution, and means using the t-distribution, just like your confidence interval template had to work for all three situations. For user input for the hypothesis test, you'll need sample statistics, you'll need the sample size, you'll need the hypothesized population parameter, the standard deviation if your question's about the mean. You don't need that for the proportions because the standard deviation is calculated from the proportion in our formula, the square root of p times 1 minus p over n, and you need the level of significance. By sample statistics, I mean it could be a p or it could be a mean, depending on what the question's about. And finally, what you need to output is your taking the input, you need to display the final hypothesis testing results. So that means you need to display the test score, the p-value, and the decision. Again, there's many, many ways you could do this, and there's no one right answer, but you might need to use like if statements and VLOOKUPs in order to be able to get these to populate automatically. Again, whenever the user inputs this information, you need to be able to output this information for them. One other thing that you need to take into account is also the direction of the test. So that might also be something that you need to put into the user input. Alternatively, you could have different sections in your template that says like look in this section if you're doing a less than test. Look in this section if you're doing a more than test. Look in this section if you're doing a not equal to test, and would show the differences in like p-values and the decision depending on what type of test you're doing, because we know that it does influence your calculations and what formulas you use in Excel based on if you're doing a lower tail less than test, an upper tail greater than test, or a two-sided not equal to test. So that's something that's also important that you could additionally put into the user input, that you want to consider the direction of the test. Or like I said, you could have it in 3 sections that you just say it's up to the user to look at the correct section, but you still would have to calculate all of the correct values using your Excel formulas for them. It's marked in the same way as for confidence intervals, just that you are given marks for the template, you're given marks for the correct input, you're given marks for the correct output, for the correct calculations, and for various circumstances like switching between the normal and the t-distribution. Again, in this video, I'll show you a quick idea for what yours could look like. I have all my formulas hidden, so this is not going to show you the answers, just maybe show you an idea, like I said, that you could ask them, is your question about the mean or the proportion? Do you know the population standard deviation or only have the sample one? Ask them to enter all the values from the question. And I also entered an input box for the direction of the alternative. And by changing that, it will change the results in the final hypothesis testing results. Also, I get my test statistic, my p-value, and the decision outputted. This is from a specific example we did in class. It's about the swimming in the goggles one that we did in our class notes. And it does automatically update. So if you change the numbers in the question, it would change the results. Or if again, you change them again, it could be that you get like do not reject. Everything goes back to the calculations and automatically updates based on the user input. So that's kind of what you would like to do. But again, I'm not showing you how you get to all of these using different formulas. That is what the assignment is for, that you have to be able to get there and create a template in your own style. So don't copy the exact way this one looks. It should be in your own design. So please reach out if you have any questions about Applied Activity 6. It's graded out of 55 marks, and again, it will be your last one in the course. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know if you need help on the assessment.